Hey everybody, it's me, Ken Heckenlively, with Twice as Lively. Thank you for joining me again for episode 21, entitled The Slender Certainty of Our Decisions. But before we jump into this episode, let's take a time to enjoy our Pete's coffee. Now, you may use any beverage you like. It is still relatively early in the morning, so hopefully it is not an alcoholic drink that you're having before noon. But if you do, I'm not going to make any judgments because this is an opinion show, but it's also a bit of a judgment-free zone. So, in honor of our dear departed leader, Scott Adams, who taught us that as you begin a live stream, it is very important to do this simultaneous sip. We honor Scott Adams with the simultaneous sip. So go and get that beverage of your choice, even if it has a little bit of alcohol, because maybe you had a rough night and you just need that little bit of alcohol to get you going in the morning. So here we go with the simultaneous sip in honor of Scott Adams. Coffee and good conversation. That's what we always seek to do here at Twice as Lively. All right. You might think that title is somewhat intriguing. The slender certainty of our decisions. Now, I thought of this title because of my interview yesterday with my longtime friend and Stanford economist, Pete Clino. That was my very first interview. And so, did everything go exactly the way I wanted it to? No. I wasn't really happy with the framing. I wasn't happy with the audio, but I was really happy with the conversation that we had. It seemed to flow easily, and I thought that was great. I think that I may have spent a little bit of too much time reading out his resume, and so that's something that in future shows I'll figure out how to do a little bit more quickly. But as I always say, when you start something new, you are going to suck. So knowing that the first interview of an actual guest was probably going to suck, I have to say, I think I did okay. I'd say I'd give myself a solid B. So I'm going to do some things to try and make those interviews go a little bit smoother, maybe to look a little bit more beautiful on the screen, make sure the audio is a little bit better. I will be getting another microphone. So in addition to this one that I have right here, there will be a microphone for my guests. So that is all in process. So I'm thinking about that. Remember my admonition that whenever you start doing something, you're probably not going to do that well at it. But the only way you get better is actually by doing it. So I'm trying to model that as well. Okay, so a couple thoughts on my interview with my longtime friend, Pete Clino. And that is when you actually sit down to talk to somebody, even somebody you've known for quite a long time, there are always some surprises. And this is something that I think is important for us to remember in all of our relationships, that we may not fully understand or appreciate or remember things about those individuals which they think are very important. I thought one of the funny things that happened was when I was asking him how he came to be an economist, and he said that, oh, well, you remember how when I started college, I was a business major. And I thought, no, I didn't remember that. I'm kind of an artsy fartsy guy. For me, I was an English and political science major, and all that business stuff and accounting and math existed in a different world. I didn't really understand it. So that was kind of funny. I was like, no, I don't remember that at all. But what was really interesting and gives me my theme for today is the story he told of when he was a business major and there were some math classes. He realized that the math classes for business majors was much easier than it was for other majors like engineering or math. And he thought, well, if it's the same class, shouldn't it be just as rigorous across all the various disciplines? And he found out that no, it wasn't. And so he made a decision, which I think speaks to why he's been successful, which is he said, I want to take the hardest one. And so he takes a really hard math class, as I recall, it was for engineering. And the first test comes back, and Pete, who is used to doing extremely well, as I mentioned, he graduated valedictorian from our college prep high school, and to my recollection, truly one of the smartest individuals that I have ever known. And he gets that first test back, and out of 100, he scored 35. Now, just remain in that moment. So you think that you're really smart. You take a test. You get 35 out of 100 on it. Your immediate reaction is, I'm really stupid. I don't get this at all. I'm failing. Not only am I failing, I'm failing spectacularly. And just remain in that moment, because I think so many of us, when we get information, and it can be about us directly or about stuff in the world, we have that kind of reaction, which is we believe that we immediately know the importance or the value of that information. And luckily for Pete, a minute or two after he got that test result, the professor said the mean in the class was 9 and the high score was like 36 or 37. So suddenly Pete's entire frame of reference switched. It switched from I'm failing to, oh, I'm at the top of the class. And then something really important happened, which is a TA in that class said, wow, you're really good at this. Maybe you should consider getting a PhD. And in Pete's telling of it, that was the first time he considered that he might be smart enough to be a professor. Now, this was shocking to me because I've been around really successful people all my life. I grew up in a country club filled with very successful people. And in knowing Pete for at that time for probably like 5 or 6 years, I considered him one of the most genuinely intelligent people I could ever imagine meeting. But he didn't have that view himself. And I found that to be fascinating, that he needed somebody else to give him that external validation. And the fact that up until that time, he had never thought that he might be able to accomplish something at that level. And so that kind of gets me to my main theme, which is we may really not know what's going on the other side, or we may not fully appreciate our own potential to do remarkable things. And there were a number of things also in the interview that I thought were really interesting. Um, Having known Pete for 47 years, uh, you have to believe that a relationship of that duration is uh, grounded on some strong mutual understandings and similarities. But there was one similarity that really struck me, very humorous, which is that in family discussions, sometimes Pete would zone out and come back to the conversation and not know what people had been saying. And as a result, his family called him light bulb, sometimes on, sometimes off. Oh, light bulb Pete came back to the conversation. That made me laugh because one of my nicknames in my family has been the absent minded professor, meaning that I can do a whole lot of really smart things and then I do something really dumb that somebody who is normal doesn't do. It's like I'm a smart person who makes stupid mistakes. And that's been kind of a theme in my life. And so I understand that I need to check myself for those things. And so one of the examples is I hate technology. And so I'm always of the opinion that whenever I'm getting involved with some new piece of technology, I'm going to mess it up. Well, I have a strategy now how to deal with that, which is what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm going to do this thing that I'm uncomfortable doing. So I'm going to set aside 5 minutes in which I swear I won't get angry. I'm just going to assume that this is doable. And I had that experience this morning. A doctor was sending me some results for my daughter. I had to do some things in order to get that information to another doctor. You know, I hate all of the technology stuff. And now you have to do all of your passwords. And if your password has been hacked, you have to get another password. Then I have to remember that password. And I'm like, okay, you know, what's the password I'm actually going to remember? I know I should write it down. I'm starting to do that, but I don't always do it. But I took 5 minutes to do that. And in 2 minutes, I had solved the problem. And so it just goes to show that, you know, maybe you should give yourself a little bit of credit. You know, you will take those moments and uh, just look at them objectively, try not to get emotional about them, and just say, oh, okay, if I give 5, 10 minutes to trying to solve this problem, can I come up with a solution? So, um, that's kind of like one of the lessons that I've been learning in my life. Another thing that was really interesting in my discussion with Pete when we got off cameras, and as you may know from the interview, Pete and I have some different opinions about President Trump, and also about the structure of government. And it's interesting because we both come at it, I believe, respecting each other's opinions, but also having different opinions. And that's one of the purposes of my broadcast is I think that we as a society need to relearn how to talk to each other about our differences. And so one of the things that we were talking about was the recent Iran war. And I felt that Pete was parroting a lot of the mainstream media, which is, why did we do this war? And Trump is lying about things. Trump said that a year ago that he obliterated the nuclear program. Well, why is he still bombing? When Jon Stewart gets out the dictionary and looks up the word obliterated, it means gone, not there anymore. What are we doing? The Strait of Hormuz was open before the war, and now it's closed. So we got nothing. And I understand what he's saying, and that is the common view in a lot of the media. But my view is a little bit different, which is there are levels to these things. And so what I had said to him is, you know, I understand that in your mind, Trump is a liar. And what I see is I see that he's persuading in a certain direction. And that direction is positive for the United States. So you go and you do a mission, and the mission to take out Iran's nuclear program was dramatic. Okay. So if you're a cheerleader for America, you say, go America. It's awesome. Does that mean there might be more you need to do? Yeah. But it's also how you are framing the issue for the world. And so, what I was suggesting to Pete is Trump is a master at giving a narrative to the world in which America is highly successful. Now, is that the truth? I don't know. I can't see behind the curtain. That's why I talk about the slender certainty of our decisions. I'm comfortable saying I understand the broad outlines of things. I'm not certain that I know everything. And at this point, I can't say whether the Iran war was a good decision or not. What I can do is I can point out the steps that Trump has taken, which are different than other presidents have when they've engaged in military actions. What I had pointed out to Pete is that the military actions that the United States have taken, which have been unsuccessful, such as Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, were based on the idea of taking territory. Now, the fact is, when you put boots on the ground, people don't like it. They don't like seeing foreign troops on their soil. So even if they don't like their leaders, they like the invaders less. Basic psychology. So I pointed out, I said, Trump's doing something interesting. What he's doing is he is taking away their toys. He's using targeted strikes to destroy their army, their navy, and their air force, and the nuclear sites. And he's not putting troops on the ground, and he's threatening Karg Island, which is where about 90% of their oil goes through. So I said it's a targeted strategy. And he's also killed approximately 50 of their leaders. So we do have a personnel change. Now, what Pete had questioned is whether that personnel change would actually result in any change in their behavior. That's not a question I can answer. But what I can say is that what Trump excels at doing is he excels at shaking the box in ways that might promote change. So I kind of feel like Trump has spent a good deal of time trying to talk to the Iranians. And what we have seen in Trump's peacemaking process with several countries, he is somebody who will sit down with anybody. I mean, for God's sakes, in his first term, he actually had a scheduled meeting with the Taliban at Camp David. And so Trump is willing to give respect to the other side, even though they might be mortal enemies. So what I was saying to Pete is I can't quite decide whether the Iran war was worthwhile. What I do see in the Middle East is I see a lot of the Arab countries looking to have better relations with Israel. They don't like Iran. Now, one of the things you should know is that the Iranians do not consider themselves Arabs. They consider themselves Persians. And so it's a very different dynamic. So what it seems to me is that the Arab portions of the Middle East are finding an alignment with Israel against Iran. And what Trump is doing is he is also on the other side showing Iran a path to a prosperous future in which they can be more successful as long as they join the peaceful world community. Now, that also makes me very concerned about what I'm seeing on the conservative side of the aisle, specifically with some of the largest commentators, people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Dave Smith. And it's really interesting because they keep talking about Trump not being a warmonger, which is something I believe. And they talk about him not starting any wars in his first term, but certainly in his second term, the Iran war was a war of choice. But what I think that analysis is missing is a couple things that even happened in Trump's first term. If you remember, in Trump's first term, there was the problem of ISIS in the Middle East, which, as Trump tells it, many of his generals said, oh, being able to take out ISIS would be a 5-year problem. Well, to Trump, that just sounded stupid. And so he talked to some other generals, which is another strength of Trump's, is he talks to everybody. And so he found a group of generals who said, no, it won't take 5 years. You need to give us 5 weeks with this plan, and we can take care of them. And so he did it. So it's really inaccurate for the commentators to say that Trump did not engage in any wars in his first terms. He engaged in wars and won them quickly. Another example, the Afghan situation. As I recall, for the last 18 months that Trump was in office, there were 0 American deaths in Afghanistan. Why did that happen? Well, because Trump showed the Taliban that he was a serious military leader by dropping the mother of all bombs on one of the Taliban administration headquarters and then saying, look, we are going to eventually leave your country, but you got to give me the cover and the ability to do it in a reasonable time frame, which he did. And so the fact that these conservative commentators are leaving out these very important actions, which took place in the first Trump administration, means to me that their analysis, at the very least, is incomplete. So I look forward to having conversations with Pete and with other people because, as I say, we make our decisions on very incomplete information. But one of the things that I thought was really wonderful about my on-air interview with Pete is we both share this this preference for action over inaction. We're fairly comfortable that we don't know everything, but we think that the road to success, the good strategy, is to take action. And so when Pete had said that his thought process is that he will try to do things, but he's had enough experiences with sports and losing in sports and in arguments with his family, all of his siblings who are older than him, as he's the youngest, kind of taught him that just because I make an argument doesn't mean I'm going to win. And so Pete is comfortable with winning, or Pete is comfortable with taking the action, but he's also comfortable with losing. And I think that's a winning strategy. If you want to be successful at something, you have to be willing to take those actions necessary to achieve your objective, but you also have to say, hey, it may not work out. But in taking your action, you will learn what things you don't know. And I think that's a really strong play. So as I talk about this broadcast being something that I hope is helpful to the audience, I just want to encourage you in your own life to take actions that seem reasonable given what you know, while at the same time realizing, it might not work out. And if it doesn't work out, that's not the worst thing in the world. And that's why when older people are interviewed at the end of their lives and they're asked the questions, what do you regret in life? The majority of those regrets are not things that they did, but they're things that they were too scared to do. So my advice to you, whatever floats your boat, is go out and do it. Give it a try. Be comfortable falling flat on your face, because once you fall flat on your face, you're going to go, oh, okay, I see what I did. All right, I learned a couple things. A couple things I did okay. Like with my first interview with Pete, I'm like, okay, some of it was good. Some of it was a bit long-winded. Maybe the framing wasn't great. Maybe I have to work with the audio a little bit, but it's okay. That was my first interview. It's going to suck, but what is my 10th interview going to be like? Oh, so much smoother. Okay, so talking about doing things that might be uncomfortable, I really have to give a big shout out to Vice President J.D. Vance for going on The View. Now, all the conservative media hates The View. Oh, they're stupid Hollywood types saying all these things. And, I understand why the argument is made, but there is nothing like sitting across from somebody and having a conversation. And I thought that JD Vance did just a great job, as well as the ladies of The View. They gave him time to talk when some people on the panel were seeking to cut him off. Other members said, no, oh, please be quiet, let him finish. So I thought that was just genuinely good. And so as much as we are instructed to be on one side or the other, I think it's psychologically healthy to always try and find some good things to say about the other side. And so I really commend the ladies of The View for having JD Vance on. I commend them for letting him talk. And as JD Vance says, hey, it seems like Joy Behar likes him now. And isn't that a wonderful thing? Because we're all here on this planet just trying to figure out how to make things better. And so I encourage people of different opinions to get together, sit, talk, maybe have a coffee, maybe share a meal. That's just the kind of thing that makes life wonderful. I'm going to take a cup of coffee now, or drink a coffee now. Okay, so I always like to do a little arts shout out, and I really have to commend Stephen King. A lot of conservatives hate him because he is so anti-conservative. And yeah, some of the things that he says, I really do think cross the line. But that is no knock against his literary and artistic talents, which are remarkable. I am having so much fun watching his limited series, 1122, 1963, starring James Franco. I think this was right before all of the Me Too stuff hit James Franco, and so I'm I'm curious. I really don't know how well this series did when it came out because the star was going through a number of problems. But if you have not gotten the chance to watch Stephen King's 11/22/1963, I really encourage you to watch it. It is just magnificent. Now, why? Well, I've written a bunch about the JFK assassination, especially in my most recent book, Book of Secrets, which will hopefully be coming out sometime in the fall. And so I know a lot about the JFK assassination. And the setup that King has is just so wonderful. So there's a time portal that opens. It opens to somewhere in 1960. You can go through, you can see what is going on, you can predict things. But Stephen King, as always, makes his stories so intriguing because you can go back into the past, but then if you come back to the present, it resets. And so you don't change the past. And so what James Franco is given the mission to do is to go into the past and prevent the assassination of JFK. But he's got to hang out there for about 3 years and then never come back. So he's given up his life, and it's a wonderful kind of story because he's a passionate history teacher working with older adults, and a couple of the people who are in his class are alive in 1963, and are brutalized by their parents. So one of the first things he does is he tries to prevent a tragedy which happened to one of his former students, where the man's father killed his mother and his sister and committed suicide. But King is always so much fun because what James Franco is told by his mentor, a guy named Chris Cooper, actor Chris Cooper, is that the past has a way of trying to protect itself. And so there's this other force that is resisting the past being changed. And so it comes in the form of, let's say you're on your way to stop something. Well, your car is going to die. You're going to get a flat tire. You're going to get into a fight with somebody. And so all the time you're wondering, okay, what supernatural force is trying to stop James Franco from preventing the assassination of John F. Kennedy? It also allows the audience to go deeply into the question of who were these figures who were associated with the assassination of President Kennedy. People like Lee Harvey Oswald, and also people like Jack Ruby. And also there was supposedly the first victim of Lee Harvey Oswald's assassination attempts was a right-wing general in Texas named General Walker. And so that happened about 6 months before Kennedy's assassination. Walker was not hit by the bullet supposedly fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. But in the section of the series I'm at now, he is hanging out, trying to see if he can figure out whether Lee Harvey Oswald actually took the shot at General Walker. And his plan is that if he sees that Lee Harvey Oswald is taking a shot at General Walker, his plan is to kill Oswald at that moment. I don't know what happens, but boy, am I excited to get back to it. So, as I say, so many of the things that we believe in our lives, we believe as a result of incomplete information. So, whatever your opinions may be, and I really encourage you to hold strong opinions, but hold them a little bit more lightly than you might otherwise do, because there may be information out there that changes your mind. So I'm just here at Twice as Lively, hoping to brighten your day and give you a couple things to think about. So have a great day, America. Bye.